It's always the places you don't necessarily hear many good things about that end up being some of the most incredible places you've ever visited. I can say this about many places that I've been in my life, especially Guatemala. I spent 2 weeks in this amazing country and did some things I never thought I'd ever be able to do, such as building a home for those in need and even climbing a 14,000-foot volcano. But at the end of it all, it was time to commence our trip back home. Today we fly from Guatemala City to Mexico City with Aeromexico on the 737-800. You'll get to see the full departure experience from Guatemala, onboard Aeromexico service, and the full arrival sequence into Mexico. It's going to be quite an interesting journey, and I hope you'll enjoy the video. It's a beautiful morning in Antigua, where I had spent my last week in Guatemala. Antigua was the original Spanish colonial capital of Guatemala for 230 years until a massive earthquake destroyed much of the city in 1773. Today, Antigua is designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It remains a very popular tourist destination as the best preserved Spanish colonial city in all of Central America. Antigua is only 40 kilometers or 25 miles from Guatemala City. Unfortunately, due to heavy traffic, it usually takes a good while to get between the two places. Today, it took us over 2 hours to travel the 25 miles between Antigua and the airport. La Aurora International Airport is the 4th busiest in Central America by passenger traffic, and as you can see, it's quite a bustling morning today. After a quick passport check, I made my way inside across to the Aeromexico check-in counters. Now, I should mention that my trip to Guatemala was with a group. The vast majority of our group was departing on the noon flight 673, while myself and 2 others were on the 5 p.m. flight 679. Despite being 6 hours early for our flight, we were still able to check in and get our boarding passes without issue. Although unfortunately, unlike Chicago, the Aeromexico staff in Guatemala City do not provide those cool ticket jackets. So even though we were all checked in, my 2 friends still had bags to check. At this point, it was understandably still too early to check in luggage for our flight, so the agent advised us to come back at 1 p.m., about 3 hours later. Thankfully, La Aurora International has a nice loft area in the check-in hall with plenty of seating and food places, and this is where we spent the next 3 hours. Now, while passing the time, I looked up at one of the signs and noticed something very peculiar for this majority Spanish-speaking part of the world. Aside from Spanish and English, the signs at this airport are also in Korean, and I never quite figured out why. If you have any information on this, please let me know in the comments. I also couldn't help but notice just how cool these departure boards were. As you can see, it's clearly a TV, but styled in a way that represents the old school flipboards. To make things even cooler, the flipping action is animated on these displays when the flights change. Upon departure from Guatemala, all international passengers must fill out an online declaration. Thankfully, the airport has free Wi-Fi, so I was able to get this formality done without any issues. Soon, 3 hours had gone by and we went back downstairs to the check-in counters. My friends were able to check their bags in, and soon after, we proceeded to security check and departure immigration. The corridor to security check is filled with souvenir shops for anyone still wanting to buy anything, and it sort of reminded me a lot of Karachi Airport. Security and immigration were cleared within literally 10 minutes to my pleasant surprise. The airside area is filled with shops and food places, and the terminal is essentially one long corridor. Despite this, there are no moving walkways, so if you're departing all the way at the end of the terminal, like on Copa Airlines for example, be prepared for a decent walk. And unlike much of what you'll find in the markets, the duty-free shops at the airport sell authentic products from big brands like Dior, Mont Blanc, and Gucci. The terminal also has a really cool kids play area by gate 19 made from an old Cessna plane. When looking at the departure board, I was finally able to see my flight for today, Aeromexico 679 departing from gate number 8. Guatemala City Airport has a lot of cool aviation history frozen in time. You just have to look for it. Right across the airfield are some old Guatemalan Air Force planes, among them 2 Douglas DC-3s and a DC-6. On the northern end of the terminal ramp is a small corner of impounded aircraft. This private Gulfstream II was impounded a number of years ago and I couldn't find much information about it. However, the Embraer 120 next to it was operated by Ecuadorian airline Tame Express. It was impounded here all the way back in 2012 after 405 kilograms of some, well, let's just say very important product was discovered on board. You might also notice all of these planes look rather dirty. That's because they're all still covered in volcanic ash from the 2021 eruption of Pacaya volcano, which we will see during takeoff. Aeromexico has 3 daily flights to Guatemala City in the summer, all of which serve Mexico City. Here's the 3 p.m. flight 671 heading back to Mexico, operated by a 737 MAX 8. Keep an eye out for this very same plane that we will see just a few hours later in Mexico City. As soon as flight 671 takes off, our aircraft rolls in as flight 678. Boarding was supposed to start 45 minutes before departure, but as I've come to expect with Aeromexico, the boarding process is not an area where this airline does especially well, so boarding was delayed by about 15 minutes.
Les recordamos mantener su pasaporte abierto en la página de la fotografía junto con su pase de abordar para agilizar el proceso de abordaje. We can remind you to keep your passport open on the picture page and also your boarding pass.
The majority of Aeromexico 737-800s have 160 seats, with 16 in Clase Premier and 144 in Clase Turista. The carrier has 6 former Norwegian 737-800s with an all-economy layout, but these are mainly used on domestic flights. An upgrade to Clase Premier was an additional $200 today, which I didn't feel was worth it. So today we're back in 21A, which costs $12 to reserve thanks to my basic fare. The seat I found to be fairly comfortable for this 2-hour flight. The seat back features an entertainment screen with a headphone jack and USB port, along with a tray table and seat pocket. The legroom was fairly decent, and thanks to the middle seat being empty, I had more space to store my bag and also stretch out. At the moment, the 737-800s do not feature universal power outlets between seats, and I'm not sure if Aeromexico plans to install these anytime soon. However, above the seat you will find air vents, call buttons, and reading lights.
Siempre llévalo abrochado, sobre todo cuando la señal del cinturón esté encendida. To store your personal items in the overhead bins or the main seating area. If you're seated in an emergency exit row or at a bulkhead, items may not be stored in the area in front of you. Please ensure that the aisle and emergency rows. Paquete viajero internacional del centro. Pase de abordar al mundo.
Today we'd be departing off runway 20, and despite there being a physical taxiway, we for some reason taxied straight onto the runway and backtracked all the way down. I couldn't figure out why we did this because there wasn't any construction on the taxiway from what I could tell. But as we backtracked, we passed by the various FBO and maintenance hangars, and there were a lot of cool planes to see. Right there is an old 1960s era Nord 262 and a Let L410 amongst other retired propeller planes. Other highlights included various retired Saab 340s from TAG Airlines. The entertainment system on the 737-800 is pretty solid, and for this flight it was more than enough. You might recall that on my flight into Guatemala a few weeks earlier, the entertainment options were all dubbed in Spanish. It seemed like that was a one-time issue since on this flight, the English audio and subtitles were all working. Aeromexico does provide earphones on board, but they're not very good. As such, I always opted to use my own. There is Wi-Fi available on board, however on the 737-800 it's pretty basic and not really worth the money. Refreshment service on this 90-minute flight was a packet of peanuts and a choice of beverage, for which I chose water. Now, it seems like Aeromexico hasn't retrofitted their 737-800s ever since they were delivered. The seats were looking a bit worn, and the screens in some places looked like they had definitely seen better days. Now, Guatemala City and Mexico City are in the same time zone, so I was kind of confused to see that the map shows Mexico City as being 1 hour ahead. What was even more confusing was that the total distance wasn't listed as 656 miles or 1,056 kilometers. There seemed to be some sort of error, so I have no idea what this number represents. But the rest of the flight was mainly spent admiring the scenery and seeing what places we were flying over. In no time, we began preparing for descent into Mexico. Much like the rest of the flight, the approach into Mexico City is quite scenic from both sides of the plane. Today we're approaching from the south, and this takes us through a series of turns which I assume was to avoid terrain. We'd come in for landing on runway 05 left.
On arriving in the country, including passengers with connecting flights, keep your stamped immigration form throughout your stay, as you must return it to authorities.
Overall, today was another decent experience with Mexico's flag carrier. While the check-in and onboard service were fine, it always seems to be the boarding and deplaning processes that are chaotic and the worst parts of it all. That trend continued with today's flight, but all things considered, Aeromexico gets a 9 out of 10 today, and the full breakdown is found in the description. We sat on the taxiway for a few minutes, and initially I assumed it was due to congestion. But then we started moving, and then I realized we're actually parking at a remote stand, and the wait was due to the ground crew getting ready to bring us in. Deplaning, as expected, was pretty unorganized. There was about a 10-minute wait before the doors were opened, and it wasn't really clear at first if we'd all be exiting from the front or if the rear exit would also be opened. But regardless, it was a beautiful evening in Mexico City, and you will surely enjoy the views coming momentarily. The bus ride across to the terminal ideally shouldn't have taken very long, but because of heavy traffic, we ended up being stopped for about 10 minutes. I wasn't complaining though, because I essentially got a free airside spotting session, and what an exciting next couple of minutes it was. And right here, the same 737 MAX we saw 4 hours earlier in Guatemala, now seen here operating a domestic flight to Guadalajara. Soon after that brief stoppage, we continued on our way to the terminal, even passing by the Quetzalcoatl livery 7879 that had just arrived from Paris. We had an overnight layover in Mexico City, so after clearing immigration fairly quickly, it was off to baggage claim for my friends to claim their bags. This was quite a hassle because it wasn't clearly communicated what belt our flight's bags were going. We soon found out the bags had gone to claim number 1, and after getting the bags, it was off to the airport hotel. I'll end the video here today, so thank you all so much for watching and stay tuned for a first-time hotel review coming out next. Until next time, take care everyone, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Adios.